ha voluto di persona partecipare al nostro incontro. Devo dire che per noi è un piacere ospitarlo, speriamo che si trovi bene e che abbia magari piacere di scrivere anche qualcosa per la nostra rivista, poi glielo spiego in inglese. E a questo punto lascerei la parola a lui, intanto io carico le slide se ci riesco. Ci siamo? Ok, visualizzazione. Voilà.
Ok, grazie. 20 anni fa ho sentito una pubblicità: imparare l'italiano è molto facile e divertente. Allora ho cercato di imparare l'italiano e era divertente ma non era facile. Ho imparato un po' ma ho tutto dimenticato. I promise I will catch up sometime, probably when I retire, or because it's a beautiful culture and language. But before that, we shall speak a little bit about the specificities of Spanish marine insurance. We can keep it short if you want, and we can say there are no specificities. Marine insurance is governed in Spain by contract. This leaves us with English law most of the times, and as I said, we could leave it there. Why is that so? Because the Spanish Insurance Contract Act expressly leaves marine insurance out of its scope, and also expressly leaves large risks insurance as defined by the EU directives out of its scope. It besides remands regulation of marine insurance to the policy. That means the parties are free to bargain for whatever they want, unless it's contrary to ordre public or to moral, which is never, I would say, the case. We do have a default regime in the commercial code. The Spanish commercial code is an ancient piece of legislation. It steps back from almost 2 centuries ago, and this particular part of the commercial code was imported from the former commercial code. So we have a medieval maritime law regulation that's sadly becoming actual in the part where it talks about pirates and things like that. So you see, actually, it's a constantly evolving word, but not all the time in the same direction. There are flashbacks. So yes, I could leave back to Madrid with that, but please allow me a couple of minutes more. Otherwise, I will feel a bit deceived, because the true specialty about marine insurance in Spain is that the nature of the policy is often challenged. If you are acting as a plaintiff against a party who is insured by what can or cannot be, you will say, a marine policy, you will most likely try to say that the policy is not a marine policy. And why is that? Because the Spanish Act for insurance contract is very protective towards the insured. It's an act that's comprehensively, with those 2 exceptions, large risks and marine insurance, regulates all insurance branches. And it's mainly thinking of an insured that's a consumer. So there are many mandatory law provisions, and that tends to protect the insured, that, as you know, do not make sense in a marine environment where both parties are supposed to have the same degree of sophistication and bargaining power. But again, if you manage to, or the counterpart manage to bring the policy into this domain of general insurance, a marine insurer may find himself in trouble, because the ordinary regime for insurance, first of all, is based on a contra preferentum construction of the policy. That is, if there's something you don't understand, it's going to be, it must be construed in favor of the insured. In our case, this comma under the policy would be construed in favor of the insured, must be construed in favor of the insured, if the insured succeeds in convincing the court that this was not a marine policy. That's point one. Point two is the existence of a direct action against liability insurers under the Spanish Act for insurance contract. We have a very expensive regime as regards to direct action. I know of other countries that do not admit direct action at all. There are countries that admit it, but just for personal injury and death cases. But Spain has broadened that very much, and it also admits direct action for material damage. And there's a third very, very important provision in the Spanish insurance law, and this is what my two slides I brought today talk about. I was ever any good at preparing PowerPoint presentations. You see why. I think it's very visualizable, if the word exists at all. Spanish law of damages is based on a principle of restoration of the situation of the victim of the damage. That is to say, if you suffer a damage, Spanish civil law will procure to put you back in the same situation you were. But you are not going to be better off because you suffered the damage. So my point is, we don't have this notion of punitive damages that exists in the US. That is, in Spain you get burned in your lips because your McDonald's coffee is 300 degrees. The court will pay you maybe the reconstruction of the lip, but you won't make the $3 million out of it. With one exception, which is insurance law. It's not $3 million, but it may be up to 20% of the amount you claim for under the policy, in a direct action against the liability insurer, or in an action against your own insurer, if the insurer doesn't pay within 2 years without reasonable grounds. There is an intermediate regime that's supposed to be the orange box. That's the legal interest rate plus 50%, which is also quite an amount. But generally, insurance companies that assume this risk, given the average duration of a proceeding in Spain, end up being exposed to the 2 years 20% regime. So if you're a marine insurer and you're confident, a foreign marine insurer, and you're confident that no one can sue you, no third party can sue you in Spain, and or are not aware of this clause, you may end up wrong situation. I'm saying also that you may be surprised, because this 20% provision is a mandatory law. There is, the court is bound to apply it if it thinks that there were no grounds for denying compensation. And so we've seen parties amazed by a verdict that contains something that was not requested by plaintiffs. And well, it's a situation to be aware of. Now I have tried to look at this. It's good.
Was it intentional or you did it on purpose?
Of course.
Yeah.
That counts as 3 slides, I guess, right? Okay. I made up let's see, if you have a claims worth 30,000 euros, well, just a normal claim, it was too nice. Well, you may up facing after 2 years interest of 12,000, and you know, if it's a 300,000 euro claim, well, accordingly. So the question is now, how can a marine policy be construed as a non-marine policy? It seems virtually impossible. Well, there are gray zones, and it's basically because of the following factors. The first factor is that this Insurance Law Act does cover carriage insurance, and does cover insure for liability of carriers, without saying leaving out marine carriers. That's point A. Point B is that there is an increasing tendency among Spanish carriers and freight forwarders to insure the goods, not just their liability on the goods, but the goods for themselves as an asset. And it's a damage insurance. It's in some countries, I'm told it's quite atypical and almost not understandable. Other countries also live with this reality. The way it happens in Spain is that carriers and freight forwarders want to ensure to their clients that they are not just going to be paid the carrier's liability, for instance, under Article 23 of CMR, but for the amount of the damage, whatever that is. That is, the client is not getting a warranty of the solvency of the carrier through a liability insurance. The client is being offered warranty for the full value of the cargo, and that's a commercial tool that's being imposed upon carriers by the market right now. It wasn't easy because jurisprudence was saying at the beginning that the carrier lacked an insurable interest on the goods, but precisely that made these kind of policies to be construed as liability policies in terms of third-party action, with a waiver to limitations of liability, something like that. So it's a produce of jurisprudential construction of a market reality that we have. So that's one reason for these gray zones. You see policies where you don't really, by Spanish insurers mainly, where you don't really know whether there is a univocal qualification of the policy. You see mixed clauses, and it's sometimes easy to mess up a court. so to say. Another source of problem is marine insurance for freight forwarders. That is to say, whenever it's not the liability for a tackle-to-tackle carriage that is being assured, but a door-to-door liability, you know, in line with the new Rotterdam rules and in line with the market practice, where you go to a freight forwarder and he, as an architect of the transportation, organizes everything. These policies in Spain are usually contracted for as liability policies, either liability policies or, as I said, damage policies. And many times it's when a casualty or cargo damage takes place, even if it's in the course of a marine risk, the policy will be is likely to be construed as a liability policy because it was so worded and so negotiated for. You know, if you are marine insurers and you see a possibility of insuring a daughter company based in Spain or something like that, be conspicuous in the policy and say, you know, big letters, this is a marine policy only. And if you can add to that wording in terms of Article 107 of the Spanish LSC, then you will avoid discussions. But of course, this is never done. Another area of confusion is port terminals, recreational vessels, shipyards, and there are contradictory cases or cases where contradictions are bizarrely explained because the court knows it's contradicting itself, so it says, but this case has to be distinguished from what we said yesterday in that, and so it's an ad hoc litigation many times. I only have 2 minutes left, so I will talk about very briefly about direct action again. We are making an effort to improve Spanish maritime law. As I said, it's very ancient, it's obsolete, it's dispersed. We're trying to pass new legislation, comprehensive legislation, codification. No one's really 100% happy with this. I would say I am quite happy because it's a step forward, something new, and well, as part of it, I guess 1 minute left. As part of it, there's a provision which will be very conflictive in the future, saying that there is direct action in marine insurance as well against marine insurers, but also and especially, this has a story behind that I don't have the time to tell you now, especially against P&I clubs. And it will be I guess, great fun for lawyers because, you know, still this provision, the way it's drafted, it respects that the policy is submitted to a foreign law. So if the foreign law denies the direct action based on in the case of the P&Is, based on the pay-to-be-paid provision, but then you have a statutory law in Spain saying that it is possible, well, we will again start applying Rambouillet theories and things like that. And I think this is in general not good for the industry, because whenever you have proceedings, you should want to have all these procedural and previous questions already out of the game and solved, and talk of the material damage before a competent court. And now I predict if this is finally passed, which I don't know, it's in the schedule, it's for October, but we don't know, there will be at least a couple of years of cross-litigation where no one really knows the outcome. Thank you very much.